Yang Berhormat Senator Tengku Datuk Seri Utama Zafrul Tengku Abdul Aziz, Minister of Finance Malaysia and Board Member Khazanah Nasional Berhad, esteemed panelists and speakers of KMF2021, Board Members Khazanah Nasional Berhad, Yang Berbahagia Datuk Amirul Faizal Wan Zahir, Managing Director Khazanah Nasional Berhad, distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. KMF 2021 is almost coming to an end, and we hope that the sessions presented in this three-day conference was thought-provoking, beneficial, and energizing. KMF 2021 covered a host of topics and speakers through a three-day virtual forum. This year's KMF theme is The Invention of Tomorrow, Crafting Our New Collective Narrative. In upholding KMF traditions, panel discussions were organized along 4 core sessions: how various markets globally are affected, what the theme means to firms and society at large, what are the imperatives of leadership and people. To frame the discussion, we started the KMF with Tamim Ansari, author, historian, and teacher, to teach us what the narrative "we" means and where are we going. This definition of global human self is a collection of self-interest intertwined with persistent story of otherness. The eventful day continued with how the sustainability and post-pandemic narrative is played in the markets and what it means to the firms. Other notable speakers include Tengku Taufik, President and Group CEO of Petronas, Robert F. Smith, founder of Vista Capital, and Manny Maseda, Managing Partner for Bain, and Dr. Fred Hu, Founder, Chairman, and CEO of Primavera Capital Group. The second and third day then continued to focus on impact of sustainability to society at large and what are the imperatives of leadership and people, with notable speakers talking about inequality, application of ESG in the markets by firms, and the transformational change that are needed in healthcare and education that the pandemic exposed. For this, KMF was fortunate to host future thought leaders like Nadim Makarim, founder Gojek, and Professor Branko Milanovic, senior scholar of Stone Center on Socio-Economic Inequality, and Professor Neil Shubin, and even Professor Peter Frankopan, talking about innovation in history of life and changing past and future. Even Professor Mariana Mazzucato on bold mission economy. With that, ladies and gentlemen, may I have the honor now of inviting Yang Berhormat Senator Tengku Datuk Seri Utama Zafrul Tengku Abdul Aziz, Minister of Finance Malaysia and Board Member of Khazanah, to deliver the KMF 2021 closing address. Yang Berhormat Senator, dipersilakan.
Yang Berbahagia Datuk Amirul Faizal, Managing Director of Khazanah Nasional. Distinguished speakers, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good afternoon. It gives me great pleasure to be delivering the closing address for what is yet another successful Khazanah Megatrends Forum. I would like to start by referring to a widely known fact about Japan's former Prime Minister, Abe Shinzo. When he was a boy, Abe Shinzo aspired to make films. His family lineage set him on a different path. Yet, as a political figure and Japan's longest-serving Prime Minister, he strived to change the stories that Japan tells about itself. Throughout his tenures, he carved out a larger role for Japan in the world. He entered multilateral trade agreements like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, established security ties with countries like Australia and India, and at home, reversed years of deflation, reduced unemployment to its lowest rate in decades, and returned the Nikkei index to levels last seen in the early 90s. Abe Shinzo is remembered as transformative, not least for instilling hope that Japan's problems could be solved. Mr. Abe changed the narrative, the stories that Japan tells about itself. The discussions and insights of the last couple of days have been precisely on that topic, narrative. Stories of Malaysia's past, present, and future. Narratives we tell ourselves, about ourselves, and the need to change some of those stories. In keeping with the theme of crafting our new collective narrative, allow me then to reflect on this. not in terms of months and years, but decades and generations. Our journey thus far, where we are now, and where we go from here. Ladies and gentlemen, when I was born in the 70s, Malaysia was a low-income country known largely for its exports of tin and rubber. The young Federation of Malaysia, with the inclusion of Sabah and Sarawak, was barely 10 years old. Malaysians were, in general, impoverished with limited access to higher education and basic infrastructure. However, Malaysians were determined to improve their lot in life and write better stories for themselves. In the 70s and 80s, this desire was thick in the air. In less than 40 years, Malaysia's economy transitioned from low income to upper middle, from agriculture focus to one based on manufacturing and services. And we have not stopped transforming and growing since. From 1990 to 2020, gross national income per capita expanded nearly sixfold to over 42,000 ringgit. Roughly 32% of the labour force now possess tertiary qualification, a more than threefold increase from 1990. The incidence of poverty reduced significantly to 5.6 in 2019. Life expectancy at birth increased to 74.7 in 2019 from 70.9 in 1990. Over the same period, income inequality also fell. Today, Malaysia's economy is open, competitive, trade-oriented, and well-diversified, supported by more than 2 decades of current account surpluses, adequate levels of international reserves, and sizable external assets. Malaysia remains more open to trade than nearly 90% of countries in the world today, and ranked 12th on the World Bank's Doing Business 2020 report. It remains one of the most competitive economies in the world, ranking 25th on the 2021 IMD World Competitiveness Yearbook. Granted, there is much left to do. Malaysia has yet to become a fully developed economy. Growth moderated in the last decade. Several disparities and structural issues persist, including the rising cost of living, higher youth unemployment, and industries concentrated in the lower end of the production value chain. However, the simple fact remains that in a span of roughly 2 generations, we changed our own narrative through progress on so many fronts, an achievement we cannot discount. Today, the narrative is more pressing and grimmer. Malaysia, along with the rest of the world, continues to grapple with the impact of COVID-19. The rising human toll worldwide and the millions of people that remain unemployed are stark reminders of the extreme social and economic strain that COVID-19 has wrought on the global community. According to the IMF, cumulative per capita income losses from 2020 to 2022 compared to pre-pandemic projections are equivalent to 20% of 2019 per capita GDP in developing economies, excluding China. This has reversed gains in poverty reduction, with close to 80 million additional people likely to enter extreme poverty in 2020 and 2021 compared to pre-pandemic projections. At the same time, the pandemic has dramatically transformed lives and businesses, be it through how we earn a living, transact with customers, or interact with loved ones. More concerning is how the pandemic has widened socio-economic inequalities and disparities. And let us not forget the less apparent but equally serious threat, climate change. In July this year, entire towns in Europe were submerged in water. In the Chinese province of Henan, hundreds of thousands of people were evacuated in the face of floods, including a city which saw a year's worth of rain in just 3 days. In that same month, the mercury at Furnace Creek in Death Valley soared to 54 degrees Celsius, which tallies with a reading taken at the same location last year for what had been officially recognized as the hottest daytime temperature ever. At the global level, Earth is 1.1 to 1.3 degrees Celsius warmer than it was before the steam engine was invented. Closer to home, Malaysia has lost over 26,000 lives to COVID-19, with countless others upended. The recent floods in Sabah and Kedah are reminders that we too are at risk from climate change. Yet, I firmly believe that we have begun our road to recovery with fresh opportunities to rewrite some narratives. Ladies and gentlemen, our recovery story begins with the National Recovery Plan, or NRP, introduced in June this year as a comprehensive approach to preserving lives while allowing the economy to open safely. The NRP will set the nation firmly on the path to recovery based on science and data. On the vaccination front, a key enabler of Malaysia's recovery, we continue to fire on all cylinders. As of 3rd October, more than 20 million people, or nearly 88% of the country's adult population, are fully vaccinated, driven by one of the fastest vaccination rates in the world. Consequently, we have seen our hospitalization and ICU rates stabilize in recent weeks. Inshallah, we are well on our way to have nearly 100% of the adult population fully vaccinated by the end of this month. We have also started our vaccination program for our teenagers. Soon, the NRP will be updated to prepare Malaysia for the next normal of living with COVID-19 as an endemic disease. The story of recovery will continue with Budget 2022, which will be expansionary while laying the foundations for the government's wider and longer-term reform efforts. Budget 2022 will focus on 3 Rs, namely recovery, resilience, and reform. Together, both the NRP and Budget 2022 will form the building blocks for Malaysia's long-term recovery and reform efforts through the 12th Malaysia Plan. In this respect, some key lessons come to mind. Firstly, efforts must be made to not only address COVID-19, but also to emerge more resilient post-pandemic. Secondly, in pursuing short-term goals to prevent an economic recession, we must also take this opportunity to address structural issues in the medium and longer term. Lastly, a proper digital infrastructure will be crucial, especially in reducing urban-rural inequality. Ladies and gentlemen, now more than ever, we have an opportunity to chart a new narrative for Malaysia. As recently announced by the Yang Berhormat Prime Minister, the 12th Malaysia Plan, or 12th Plan, lays down fundamental reforms that will transform Malaysia's development trajectory to achieve a prosperous, inclusive, and sustainable Malaysia. The plan's immediate priorities will be to catalyze growth, narrow existing socio-economic disparities, and ensure environmental sustainability. The plan will also focus on upholding national security and sovereignty, as well as solidifying national unity. Furthermore, policies, programs, and projects in the plan will continue to be aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. On that note, special mention must be made on sustainability. The next 5 years will see a crucial shift to more sustainable economic practices. In the 12th Plan, one key goal is to achieve a 45% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions intensity to GDP by 2030, compared to 2005 intensity levels. The game changers like embracing the circular economy and accelerating the adoption of integrated water resources management will prove critical. Overall, the plan will target growth of between 4.5 to 5.5% per annum, resulting in a GNI per capita of 57,882 ringgit or $14,842 in 2025, while regaining full employment. To ensure its success, the Ministry of Finance is fully committed to provide for the development expenditure of the nation as detailed in the 12th Plan. Wider government efforts to complement the 12th Plan will entail strengthening our fundamentals to be a more open, trade-oriented, and service-driven economy. While the pandemic has altered supply chains and halted services trade, the principles of economic advancement remain the same today as they ever were. Stay open to trade, compete in global markets, and invest in infrastructure and education. On trade, the implementation of the ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint 2025 and new free trade agreements, including the regional comprehensive economic partnerships, are expected to boost trade growth. Other to-be ratified trade agreements like the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, or CPTPP, will further benefit domestic industries. Of course, investment will be critical and getting the right kind with the right partners. In this respect, the National Investment Aspirations, or NIA, led by the Ministry of International Trade and Industry, was introduced to promote a sustained flow of quality investments. At its heart, the NIA will be the basis for comprehensive reforms in all investment-linked initiatives and policies. This policy framework will act as a foundation for Malaysia to become a regional investment hub, which will increase economic diversification, create high-value jobs, and enhance inclusivity. A unique driver of Malaysia's growth story is government-linked investment companies, the GLICs, and government-linked companies, the GLCs. Empowering both in jump-starting economic reform is the genesis of the recently announced Perkukuh Pelaburan Rakyat Program, or Perkukuh. Perkukuh consists of 20 key initiatives developed based on a fundamental review of the GLIC setup to sharpen the mandate of the GLICs, institute best-in-class governance among GLICs, and spur more investment in new growth areas. On that note, I'm thrilled that Khazanah Nasional is taking the lead in making catalytic investments through its newly established Dana Impak. Khazanah Nasional will be allocating 6 billion ringgit through Dana Impak over the next 5 years to improve household income and achieve other socio-economic outcomes linked to the national agenda and aspirations. In addition to Dana Impak, I applaud Khazanah Nasional's commitment to enhance its investment strategies and processes for sustainable and responsible investing. An integrated digital infrastructure will also be vital in this increasingly digital age. In this respect, the implementation of the Plan Jalinan Digital Negara, or JENDELA, will enhance digital connectivity while achieving full 4G coverage and 100% broadband coverage in populated areas. The establishment of Digital Nasional Berhad will further accelerate 5G coverage, beginning with a pilot launch by December 2021 with a target of 80% coverage by end 2024 with full-fledged 5G capabilities. No doubt, these efforts will complement our path to achieving a prosperous, inclusive, and sustainable Malaysia. Ladies and gentlemen, shortly after becoming Prime Minister for the second time in 2012, Abe Shinzo said, "If the Japanese need one thing now, that thing is confidence, the ability to turn our faces to the sun, like the sunflower does when it blooms at the height of summer." In many ways, the same could be said of us. If Malaysians need one thing now, that thing is confidence, the ability to turn our faces to the sun. It is in that spirit that I implore my fellow Malaysians to remember how far our past collective narratives have brought us from the low-income country known largely for its exports of tin and rubber to the open, competitive, and well-diversified economy it is today. It is in that same spirit that I call on all parties, government, private sector, civil society, the rakyat, to come together as one keluarga Malaysia. And with the National Recovery Plan, the upcoming Budget 2022, as well as the 12th Malaysia Plan as our guide, let us give ourselves a new narrative based on our collective courage to heal Malaysia and to inspire hope and optimism that we will successfully recover and become more resilient in 2022 and beyond. As we once did before, it is time we change the narrative, the stories that we tell ourselves. On that note, allow me to thank and congratulate Khazanah Nasional for successfully organizing Khazanah Megatrends Forum 2021. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to seeing you at the next installment of the Khazanah Megatrends Forum. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.